my colleagues would come to me and say, this person just messaged me at like 4 a.m. I don't know what to do. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Lab. I'm Henry Kirk.
And I'm Jonathan Aronson.
And today we are going to talk about the very important topic of work-life balance. And we're actually going to cut this week's episode in half because I have to get back to work, actually. So, Jonathan, why don't you tell listeners what they're going to get out of today's episode?
Yeah, so what we hope is that you recognize, actually be mindful of your work-life balance, and maybe some techniques on what you can do to mitigate unequal work-life balance, and why you would want to do it. What would be the benefit of it? So that's kind of what we're looking at in the next 15 minutes because you have to go back to work.
Yeah, actually,
Henry? Really?
Yeah, of course. What I would love to get out of today as well, and I hope listeners do too, is I struggle with work-life balance a lot, especially having gotten laid off recently and starting my own business. And, you know, I work way longer than I did at Google, and I wonder is this going to persist or not? And so I'd love some strategies to be able to kind of reclaim time for myself. So why don't you kick it off, Jonathan, as usual?
Yeah. Okay. So thanks. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thanks for listening. So work-life balance, I mean, big deal, right? You know, it's like, it is a big deal, not big deal. Companies ask more and more and more from their employees. And this little thing called a smartphone, as everybody has one, right, ties us to work. And, you know, it's very easy to go home, check, ding, hear a bell go off, check my messages. I'm important. Somebody's looking for me. I mean, it's interesting because studies have shown that when you hear the bing for a text, for instance, it actually puts a little endorphin buzz in your brain, so there's like a subconscious kind of thing going on for you to check your message because it makes you feel good. But ironically, back in the day before we had cell phones, we'd leave the office, we'd go home. Now we work out of the office. That's a challenge of separating work and home life. And even if we work in the office, we take this little box home with us that bing goes off and people are checking their messages and people do not have boundaries anymore when it comes to texting people in off hours. Right? I am of the age when they did not have these kind of abilities where when somebody went home after work, they were home. And honestly, it would be almost sacrilegious to call somebody at home after work. Okay, the norm was you do not do that unless it's a really important situation. Then you'd pick up the phone. Maybe you're traveling the next day and your partner needs give you some information or, something like that. But it would be an extreme case. You know how everybody started those phone calls pretty much, Henry, when they called you at home?
No, what was it?
I'm really sorry I have to bother you at home. That's how they would start it. Now, fast forward to where we are today. Now it seems like it's more the norm. So what do you think the impact it has on the person's family or family life?
Well, people feel obligated to respond. I'll get these messages at night that say, I hate to bug you, or you don't have to respond till tomorrow, but,
yes.
Then I'm always asked like, well, do you respond? Do you not? Like, and then if you do, you're creating that expectation. I had a manager at Google once that used to message people at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. with questions. They would never say anything like, get back to me or do anything. But since they were such a high level person, my colleagues would come to me and say, this person just messaged me at like 4 a.m. I don't know what to do. And they were a very early riser. And so they were just getting work done. And I said, well, if you respond, they're probably going to continue doing it, I would think, right? But it actually created such tension and anxiety for my colleagues that like they didn't know how to respond to it. They didn't know what to do. Sometimes they did, and other times they didn't. And then so it just created. It's just interesting. It's like that's an extreme example that I've recently seen.
Well, there you're also putting in the power dynamics that somebody is either perceived power dynamics, whether the person meant to use their power or not. Okay, so one thing you mentioned is stress. Yeah, evidence has proven that a lack of work-life balance creates more stress, and with more stress creates health problems. Honestly, plenty of research done on that. And then the other thing, the impact of work-life balance is that if you are married and have kids or have a family life, you're not there with them. You're not present with them. And what impact does that have on them, right? There's so many reasons to have a good work-life balance because actually you're more productive at work when you have a work-life balance. And people just really struggle because, again, of the little box. You're always tuned in, you're on, and you work from home. Go sit with the family, watch TV, or go to your office and, play in your own sandbox, basically, which is your work stuff,
Well, so how do you think this all starts? Is it the expectation of the manager or the company that you're always on? I mean, like, look at tech companies today, right? They pay us very well. And they give us a ridiculous amount of freedom to kind of set our own hours.
Yep.
And we get to choose how we work. And so that will create different dynamics on a team. So I've had people on my team that will say, my work hours are from 8 to 4. That's just how they work. And I cannot respond after that. And then I would have other people that would work from noon till 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And occasionally they would come to me and say, hey, Henry, I can't get in touch with this person. I said, well, you have to respect his, he's setting these boundaries because he has a, family or whatever other obligations that he has. And so you need to find ways to work around that. And so I can see where it creates conflicts. But then it's also, I'll hear comments in those situations. They say, well, that person, is lazy, or that person doesn't want to work as hard as I am, or all that stuff. And then my response is, well, take a look at time management or something like that. You made a comment before, Jonathan, about you're more productive when you set those boundaries at work.
Yes.
So how does that play? Like, why do you say that that's the case?
Because, again, you're rested. You're not worrying about maybe family stuff because you're spending time with them. You know what's going on. Also, by being with your family, it releases certain endorphins and oxytocin into your system that, actually, helps the body thrive, which also has to do with cognitive ability. So again, I'm not a scientist. I invite the audience members to go do their own research on this. All right. But setting the boundaries is the key. All right. And if people know the boundaries and everybody's on the same page, then you can work around it. Now, if a guy works off hours to somebody else, then they need to work out how they're going to communicate. If the company allows them to, be able to set their own hours, that's fine. But is it going to affect the communication between team members? If it is, then there needs to be an overlap, right? Somewhere where they're both going to be available at the same time. So, you can set your own boundaries, but does this make sense in terms of what the expectations of the company is? And also, does it make sense in terms of the expectation you have as well as the employee?
Okay, I get that. And I do remember setting these sorts of expectations and boundaries that we have to respect other people's work style, but my requirement was that they need to be forthcoming with that is. So, all right, I'll give you a situation that happened just the other day. So I had a family event over, a family event at my house, and I'm in charge of client relationships and sales for my new company. It's one of my
Uh-huh.
responsibilities. And so somebody had messaged me about wanting to move forward with a project, and I saw it and I responded. But when I was looking away handling it, I missed something as part of the event that was happening, and I was like, "Oh crap! I just missed the moment." Like they were talking about something, and they like, "Hey Henry, put the phone down." I'm like, "Yeah." So how I feel almost like salespeople, like had I not responded till the next day, would they have still been interested in me? I don't know, but then there's this anxiety that I have where it's like if I don't respond right away when I got that message to like take, acknowledge that. I feel it's a little different than working in a team. Like, so what tips would you have for someone that's kind of like in that very like, like sales environment or something like that?
I think it's situational, right? Sales, and I've been in sales, so I understand your working commission. Again, you set your own boundaries, you set your own hours, and you create whatever works for you in that. Maybe there's a agreement in your family when certain sales opportunities come up that you're going to take a look at it. Or maybe you put automatic messages on, for instance, when people are trying to get a hold of you and offering, and you just put on there, hey, sorry I missed you. I'm tied up at the moment. Please leave. I'll be back online at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Um, I'll respond to you accordingly as soon as I'm back online. And so the idea is, as long as you're communicating, yeah. I mean, there are ways to set things up to create boundaries automatically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like these reply messages when you're not available, um, getting alignment with the people you're working with, going to say, for instance, letting everybody know on your team that you do not check your messages after 6 p.m. or after 7 p.m. at night. So if it's something urgent and they want you to take a look at it, please let me know before 7 p.m. Because at that point, I turn off my phone. Yeah, I can actually let them know. I turn off my phone. I don't check business texts at all. But if it's a real emergency and you really have to speak with me, call me. Okay. And then I will know that it's super important and I'll be more than happy to talk to you. Why do you think that works in today's culture? Think of today's culture.
Why? So I actually don't know because I don't do that. Like I struggle to turn off my phone. I mean, there's a new research. There's a new. I've heard people doing where they get the separate work phone now, so they can try to
Yeah.
do that. But still, like I agree with that, but I still yet to do it because I'm just so nervous about missing that opportunity, especially in an international business that we have now. Like I have clients all over the world now, so it's like how do you not turn it off? Because like late night for them, is very early morning for
Again,
me, and then
messaging them the time you're available so that they know
uh,
wherever the overlap time is.
I
If
see.
if they want to speak to you, will they speak to you?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. They'll find a way to speak to you. All right. The amount of clients that might turn away, go look for business elsewhere because they can't get you right at that time,
Mm-hmm.
isn't really valuing what you bring to the table, is it?
Oh, that okay. That's a valid point. That's a valid point. Is that
You
maybe
know?
they're not the right customers for me, clients for me anyway, if they're gonna have these 24-hour expectations? I say that's
Yeah.
fair.
And also, I want to let you know, do you want to set those expectations? But also, just to follow up what I was saying before, people don't want to use the phone unless it's absolutely necessary. That's what it was back in the day, and that's what it still is today. So if you set the boundary saying, if it's a real emergency, give me a call, they're not going to pick up the phone unless they really have to.
Hmm.
And then it's great. Fine. Talk to them. But the amount of times I can guarantee you that that's going to happen is going to be very minimal. Because unless it's heart surgery and somebody's dying, none of this is pretty, generally speaking, none of it is that much of an emergency.
Okay. So what you're saying is the first step here is to essentially create that boundary, set that boundary, let your team know, let whoever else that you need to, create the right messaging around it. Then work with your family or whoever you're going to be, balancing this time with, to
Yep.
let them know that there may be certain cases where you have to step away, and that's valid.
Yep.
And then focus on yourself is something that you also mentioned too.
Yes.
And so that's like, and I do this for stress relief, which is like exercise. So you're saying like pay attention to your sleep, exercise, probably
Absolutely.
making sure that you're not out partying all night long, because that's going to have
You,
impact on your ability to work
you
the next day.
exactly. You're the vessel of work, right?
Mhm.
So I coach people a lot in saying, focus on yourself first because you can't, like on the airplane, they always say put the mask on first before you put it on your
Mm.
kids, right? So take care of yourself first, take care of your friends and family, your close friends and family second, and then work comes in. And think about why you might want to do that, what's important for you. I always use the idea of when you're 95 years old and you're towards the end of your life and you're thinking back, you think about all the hours you put in work, and is that company thinking about all the hours you put in? Probably not. Well, maybe if it's your company, because that's part of you, but outside that, probably not. You're thinking about your friends, your family, important milestones in your life, you know? So kind of keep that in mind too when you're thinking about work life balance and creating boundaries.
Okay. Okay. That's fair. All right. Well, it's been about 15 minutes and now I have to get back to work. So let's let's wrap up.
We'll work on you, Henry. We'll work on
Yeah,
you.
this is going to be a many conversations for sure. All right. So, anything else to add as we wrap up?
No. Well, what'd you get out of today, Henry?
I'm going to look into the these auto responding messages, because I think that's probably what I need, because usually the anxiety that I get waiting to respond to that person
Uh-huh.
is going to be too much. But if I have an autoresponder that says, hey, these are my general response hours, or, and if it's emergency, that'll
Right.
help, because I do respect the hours of my teammates. Like I'll never message them super late. It's,
Oh,
but the external world is a lot different. So I'm going to try that, and then I'll circle
all right.
back and let you know how that goes.
All right. Sounds good.
Great.
If you can get one thing out of these coaching sessions, Henry, I'm happy for
Yeah, that's
you.
awesome. All right, great. Well, you have been listening to the Leadership Lab. I'm Henry Kirk,
And I'm Jonathan Aronson.
and thank you for listening. And don't forget, if you got this far in our very short episode, please like, subscribe, and we launch new episodes every Friday morning, so you can listen to it on the weekend, on your way to work, whatever you want.
Sounds good.
All
I'm
right.
going to like and subscribe right away, Henry.
All right, great. Yeah, you better do it. You haven't done it yet, actually. I looked. All right, have a good one, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.